Hey, it's Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com. It's Monday, it's April 27th. This will be our chart lesson for today. We're almost done with this month, just a few more trading days. Um, and what looked like was going to be a rather uneventful type day turned out to be a pretty good trend day. So early on, this looks really rangy almost, especially when it bounced here. And I actually had this two-tiered channel working up. It actually confirmed it here, but prices just could not. But yeah, what looked like was going to be a nice or a slow trend day turned out to be a really nice trend day. So um, again, we had a two-tiered channel working up. We kind of confirmed it here, but it turned out to be a failed break higher and gave you a nice trap. Um, you could see the resistance across here. I should have my line on here. I don't have it. We'll just put it on here real quick. But there was some really strong resistance across here that just continued to hold. And you could see it starting to lose a little bit of momentum here on this third push higher when it failed and it broke higher above that bullish bar. And notice this trade right here. We'll talk about it when we get there, but it was just enough. It's a second entry long. It's right off the trend line. It's not a great setup. I've circled it in green, but if you traded it, it got just enough. And even this one got just enough for a scalp. Um, so this one was a little bit. You did have to use I used a limit order here because you wanted to make sure you had enough room to get out before you got up here. I think it worked anyway. I'll have to go back and look at it. But if you didn't use a limit order and it didn't work, let's just look at it real quick. Your entry with a stop order would have been 18 and a quarter, and it went to 19 and a quarter, but you could see it bounced off that a few times. You might have gotten filled, but you never know about those limit orders. Most of the time it does have to tick through the limit order to fill you. Although if you use automated strategies, I know a lot of times I'll get filled even though prices don't push through. But generally, when you do get filled, they push through pretty quickly or after one more little pullback or something. And that didn't happen today, so I don't know if you would have gotten filled. But when it broke higher, I just dropped a limit order right there, one tick into that. It filled it, and I was filled before we got up here to the previous closes. And that's generally how I determine if I'm going to enter that. It's a little bit iffy. I went back and forth about whether or not to make that one green, but I actually thought it was good, even with a stop, but I guess I was wrong. So, uh, and it's really a first entry off the EMA, but look how this is doing. Uh, Even though this went higher, I treated that like a second entry. It looks close enough, and so that's why I kind of liked it. And I really thought we'd push on up there, but prices just couldn't do it. This was tough resistance. And notice where we are. We broke through that 2100 area again. We're about 2119, and we'll go back and forth around it. And you can see right where we bounced, right off the 2100 area. Those century marks are just like that. They're very emotional areas, and prices will bump around on both sides, below and above, multiple times before usually going higher. We've been here for a while now. We just can't seem to get much higher. I don't know if today was a new high or not, but it's probably close if we didn't make a new high. But you know, we just can't seem to go much higher than where we're at right now, though, regardless of how you look at it. So, but let's back out and talk about the trades. And really, when we broke lower here, I was going to treat it like a range day. And you can see when we came by this area right here, I don't have my line drawn all the way across there, but it was acting as support, and then it ended up acting as resistance. Um, so that's what you're looking for. And this was a little breakout pullback short here with a little trap. It looked like it was going to go higher, and that's really tempting to take. But by that time, you should have seen this other channel and recognize we're not down to the lows yet. And guess what? We get down there, and that's where it bounces. But then we can't get back over to the other side. But that's because the previous support is too strong a resistance, and we start working lower again. And you really could almost draw. It doesn't much matter because it's too late in the day now. This is after 2 o'clock, but you can almost draw you a new trend line right through there and use that. So if you were still trading, that's what you'd want to do. Just draw that new trend line. And it looks like it's probably two-tiered as well. And really all that happened there is prices are swinging back and forth on both sides of this midline of the bigger channel. And it looks like we kind of turned down right there off the tops again. I don't have my line drawn that far down, but let's just pull it on down there. You can see that. But let's talk about the trades. The earliest trade I saw was this short right here. We had a shorter term trend line working up. We got a break, moved to a new high. We tried to go higher once. We pulled back. There's a second entry long there, but look at all the overlap. You got to be real careful going long out of that, especially when you're finding resistance right here and you've already made a new high after a break. So you just kind of got to sit tight. When it broke higher and gave you this big bearish bar, I like to go in short right there. You might have considered a limit order, and it would have gotten filled back up in here a tick or a couple of ticks probably, and then it shoots on down, and then it pushes lower one more time. It was tempting to go short here, but this just ended up with a bunch of overlap. I think it would have worked, but I just don't think you want to go short there. There's not a good setup. This was your failed second entry long, and then it pulls back. You get a first, notice the new low, pull back, first entry, pull back. But when you get a doji and then it can't break lower and it ends as a doji, so a lot of times what will happen is it'll break lower and snap back, and that's exactly what happened. So I like this for a long here, especially if you drew this line off these tops and drug it down, and that's how I found this one. I drew it off these tops and drug it down, and that seemed to work both times today. And notice where we bounced right off that. So I really thought we'd probably work higher from there, and we did. But we still couldn't get through the resistance up here. This was a really nice trade. Any runners would have been safe. You ride that up, and then you get, notice the new high. And it's tempting to go short there, and it would have worked. But I think you got to wait on a second entry, and it comes over here, but then you don't get a very good setup, and then there's a lot of overlap that's kind of flat across there. I think you're better off to wait and see what happens. And so, but I actually like this for a long right here, based on what we talked about first, because it looks like a little two-legged pullback. And I really thought we'd test this again and probably I really thought we'd go higher since we bounced here, but it just didn't happen. And that's why you got to be real careful going long into strong resistance or going short into strong support when you find it, like right in here. Notice that support across there. You got to be careful going short into that, because what will usually happen is it'll fail first, even if it's going to go lower, and that's what happens. It fails, pulls back, and then it gets everybody thinking long again, and it turns down again. But you got to be able to find these trend lines and understand what's happening. So, but this was your failed second entry long here, a big bearish reversal bar. The trend line was a little bit of concern, but at this point I'm thinking more of a range. So, and the fact that it's a trap and a big bearish bar, I think you're okay. I think you're going to come down to at least here and probably test this, and you may even go lower, and that's what happened. We test this, and then it goes lower. So if you just caught these two moves, they both were runners, and you could have made some pretty good money off those two trades. And then you get this bounce when you get this failed break below here. Notice if you drag your line, you can see the little failed break. It goes higher, and it turns down right off that trend line again. You can see this bearish bar here. It didn't quite close on its low, but we already had a second entry, and then they fooled people about it going higher, and then it turns down. And there's a lot of overlap. So this one I was real close to making this green, but the fact that it was right off that trend line, I felt it was worth risking, and it does turn out to be. And there is room to get out before here. It turns out to be a pretty good trade. And then it pulls back, and you've already got this confirmed. It's touched it several times, but this pretty much just tells you, hey, this is a good trend line, and this turned out to be a really good trade. And it just keeps on going. Then it pulls back. First entry, pull back, and you get that little trap, a double top, and a big bearish bar. If you can get filled on that one, you probably had to use a limit order, and you had to be quick, but it's a nice little move down. It was tempting on this one too, but we had a break of this little channel, a new low, and we just bounced off the low of the bigger two-tier channel. So there's a good chance that you get trapped here and it goes higher, but it just turns down. And then it pulls back, first entry, pull back. And again, there's a second entry right there, but I just wasn't crazy about it because I really was expecting prices to come back up here. But that's strong resistance. So just kind of wait on a second entry. I would have liked this one much better if it broke higher and then turned down, but it didn't. It just made a higher low. So when it broke lower right there, you probably want to use a limit order and ride that one on down, and that's the reason that one's green there. I just wasn't convinced that we had enough price action to trust that that's going to hold and won't push through. But then it moves down, bounces again, and turns right back down. It gives you a big bearish bar. Just go short there again, and that got you into the 2 o'clock hour. There is another second entry short right there. If you were still trading, that one's just right into the 2 o'clock hour. I'll go ahead and mark it. I like that one as well if you're still trading. And notice that this new channel kind of took over after this little range here. So, but yeah, what looked like was going to be kind of an uneventful, slow type day turned out to be a really nice downtrend. And the downtrend started, I'd say it starts here. But it got pretty interesting starting right here on down. But this is where I'd say the downtrend started. You got this double top here, and you tested it once. You pulled back and tried to test it again and made a lower low and lower high. Look at that, lower low, lower high. That's a sure sign, and then off we went. And I really wasn't expecting this downtrend at all. I really wasn't. And you really couldn't be sure. I felt pretty confident because you got your first two swings and your confirmation here, but you got that right here. Notice it failed. So I really wasn't real sure until it held again. Then I felt pretty confident that, hey, we're at least going to test the lows for a range here. And notice how it tried and tried to get back above that, but it just couldn't do it, and it gives up again. And that's what happens. Prices will test areas multiple times, and notice we traded down into this, so the odds are we're going to go lower here. That's generally what happens. So it's not 100%, but like anything, that's kind of the bias. If you trade down into a range, the odds are you'll probably break out successfully to the downside. You might get a trap or two out the upside, but they couldn't even get a trap here. It was so weak. So there just wasn't, the buyers were just out, and there weren't a lot of buyers today. The buyers gave up after this right here, and they didn't come back. They tried to right across here, but it just kept going lower. And that's pretty much it for today. Not much out of the ordinary, other than this is a good example. Once you know the trends changed, forget that we didn't make a new high on this two-tiered channel here. You just got to forget that and go with what you see here. It could be that this is a range and we just don't have enough, the range is taking over. It could be a lot of things, but yeah, don't argue with the price action. Really, up until about right here, your short-term trend lines gave you exactly what you needed to know. They all played out perfectly, every one of these. You've got a trend working up, the break a new high. You got a trend working down, the break the new low. You got a trend working up, the break the new high. And then you start working here. This is where the downtrend kind of started. You got a trend working down, break new low. You got a trend working up, break new high. You got a trend working down, break new low. So if you just followed those short-term trend lines, it gave you everything you needed. And I can't stress enough, trying to use those. And you've got to understand how they work. And you can't just draw lines wildly and get them to work. But it's, and it's not an art really either. It's a skill. And the longer you do this, the more you'll understand and the better you'll get at it. So, but yeah, not much else I can say about today. Pretty good downtrend. Took a little while to get going, but there were a couple of pretty good trades here before we even knew we had a downtrend. Really, once the downtrend, it was obvious it was going to continue lower. There wasn't much left to, all your really good trades were up here. So in this range, and I mean, I love range days, I really do, because they're so predictable. You know what's going to happen. You try to sell the highs and you try to buy the lows for the most part, and generally they work out really good. And you can see those are probably two tiers there. They're probably real close. See if they're measured tiers. There's maybe a tick or two difference there, and this might be this is just a little higher to where you catch most of the touches, and then that makes that one a little bit low. So, but anyway, it's basically a two-tiered trading range. Really, the range was here, and once we started going lower, this didn't really hold. So you can't really say this part was involved in it very much. But generally, your highs and lows of the day will kind of set the range area. But sometimes you get these little in-betweeners like this one. This is just a range across here, and you really had to go to range rules. And based off that, you really could have taken a trade here. I'll even circle that one green. But notice once it started working lower, how there's not. Somebody asked me that the other day. It seems like I'm showing more. I wasn't sticking to my rule about not counter trend trading. But when it's a range, the only way to trade it is to sell the highs of the range and buy the lows. You don't worry about the counter trend as much, because if it's we're more worried about the counter trend when you got a known trend. So once it was obvious we were going lower, I didn't mark any more longs. That's the only one that I would consider. But we were back in a range. It really, notice this, that you got that little double bottom in that trap and a reversal bar way away from the EMA. So I'm still going to mark that aggressive because it's somewhat counter trend. But generally when you've got a range, you don't worry about. You can buy and sell both sides of the range. It's just when you got a trend that's real strong that you want to stay away from counter trend trading. So hopefully that's clear. But that's really about it. I'm going to wrap it up for today. This is Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.